This is the grave of someone who lived a life that felt too heavy for one person to carry. A life full of loneliness, confusion, fear, and a kind of inner chaos he never managed to explain to anyone. Franz Kafka once wrote, "I cannot make you understand. I cannot make anyone understand what is happening inside me. I cannot even explain it to myself." That sentence alone feels like his entire life squeezed into one moment. And the strange part is that the world only understood him after he died. The man who felt invisible ended up defining a whole feeling. People today still use the word Kafkaesque to describe moments when life feels surreal, oppressive, or absurd. It is the feeling of being trapped inside a nightmare built by rules no one understands. In his lifetime, he was just a shy, exhausted man who told his best friend to burn all his writing. He never knew millions would relate to him. He never knew his stories would help people feel less alone. So today we are diving into the life of Franz Kafka, the man who lived quietly, suffered deeply, and ended up reshaping the world of literature long after he was gone. Franz Kafka was born on July 3, 1883 in Praha. At the time, it was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. He grew up in a middle-class Jewish family during a period when anti-Semitism kept rising. He spoke German in a city where most people spoke Czech. He was surrounded by people, but he always felt like he did not belong to any of them. His parents worked long hours running their business and often left the house for 12 hours a day. Kafka spent most of his childhood alone, trapped inside a home that looked stable from the outside but felt emotionally empty. His father, Hermann Kafka, was a large and intimidating man. He grew up poor and worked his way into success. Kafka later described him as a true Kafka, strong, loud, confident, dominant, and convinced he always knew best, a force of nature with no brakes. Franz was sensitive and quiet, the complete opposite. This difference turned their relationship into a lifelong wound. Kafka wrote more than 100 pages to his father in a letter he never had the courage to give. In the letter, he tries to answer the question his father once asked, "Why are you afraid of me?" Kafka replies that even explaining the fear would require far more detail than he could express when speaking, and even in writing, he admits the explanation would still be incomplete. His father forced him into a stable profession, so Kafka earned a doctorate in law and spent a year working as an unpaid legal clerk. After that, he worked at an insurance company. He was talented and was promoted quickly, but the schedule ruined him. He worked from 8 in the morning until 6 in the evening. By the time he got home, he was too drained to write or read. Whenever he was stuck at work, Kafka felt like he was disappearing. He wrote a short story called Poseidon that mirrors this feeling. In the story, the sea god is trapped behind a desk, doing endless bureaucratic paperwork instead of ruling the ocean. It is funny at first, until you realize this was Kafka talking about himself, someone with a huge inner world forced to live inside an office. In his diary, he admitted that his entire life consisted of attempts to write, which mostly failed. But when he did not write, he felt destroyed and useless, as if he was only worthy of being thrown away. His body was fragile and he often felt weak. He worked in a job that drained him. He had a father who intimidated him. He had dreams but almost no time or confidence to chase them. He felt alienated from everything, including his own body. Kafka also struggled in love. His most famous relationships were with Felis Bauer and Milena Jasenska. His letters to them reveal fear layered on top of affection. To Felis, he wrote that he did not think he loved her in a normal way because his love was filled with fear. Fear of failing her, fear of disappointing her, fear of ruining the little life he barely knew how to live. With Milena, the bond was intense and emotional, but she was already married. Kafka once wrote to her, "You are everything that I need, but at the same time, you are everything that frightens me." No amount of distance could erase her from his mind, and no closeness could calm his restless heart. His insecurity was not only emotional, he struggled with his appearance and sometimes believed people found his body disgusting. His health was terrible. He had migraines, insomnia, digestive problems, lung issues, and eventually tuberculosis. He tried vegetarian diets, sunbathing, exercise, anything that might help him feel better. None of it worked. But the pain fueled something. At age 29, he had a burst of creativity and wrote The Judgment in one sitting. He described it as a complete opening of body and soul. A moment where everything flowed for the first time and he felt reborn as a writer. It was dark, strange, and powerful, just like everything else he would write. He wrote for himself simply because he felt he had to. But his private writings became deeply meaningful to people all over the world. Even during his life, he felt they were failures. He never wanted them published. That is why he told his friend Max Brod to burn all his manuscripts when he died. Max Brod refused and chose to save them. Because of that choice, the world got the trial, the castle, and the rest of his work. One of the few works Kafka published during his own lifetime was his most famous one today, Metamorphosis. In this story, Gregor Samsa, a traveling salesman, wakes up one morning and finds himself transformed into a gigantic insect. No explanation is given. Kafka throws you into the nightmare and leaves you there. Gregor does not even ask why this happened. He only worries about being late to work because he is lying on his back and cannot get up. Before the transformation, Gregor was already alienated. He worked endlessly to support his family and had no meaningful connections because his job kept him constantly traveling. He felt trapped and drained. Becoming an insect simply made the invisible visible. His family is terrified when they see him. His manager runs away. His father attacks him with a newspaper and later with apples. One apple gets lodged in his back and causes him constant pain. His sister brings him food, but he stops liking fresh meals and prefers old rotten ones. He hides in dark corners and crawls on the walls. The story gets heavier when his family slowly stops caring. His room becomes a storage space. They start discussing whether he is still human. Gregor hears everything but cannot respond because his voice has turned into insect sounds. I cannot make you understand. I cannot make anyone understand what is happening inside me. I cannot even explain it to myself. The line in the story echoes Kafka's own feelings in real life. There is a moment when Gregor crawls out of his room because he hears his sister playing violin. He wonders if an animal could feel moved by music. It is heartbreaking because it shows the last piece of his humanity, but the boarders living in the house see him and immediately decide to leave. The sister finally tells their parents that Gregor is only a burden. She insists that the real Gregor would want to disappear to let them live peacefully. The parents agree. Gregor hears everything. He dies quietly that night, and the next morning the maid says, "Now we can be grateful to God." His family throws his corpse away and goes on with their life. Kafka used Gregor's body to show how someone can fade out of their own family until they are no longer seen as human. That fear lived inside Kafka too. 2 years after writing Metamorphosis, Kafka wrote The Trial. It was published only after his death. The chapters were disorganized and incomplete. Max Brod arranged them in the order we know today. The story begins with Joseph K. waking up on his 30th birthday to find strange men in his room. They tell him he is under arrest, but they never explain why. He goes through endless bureaucratic processes full of rules that make no sense. He tries to find the court. He gets lost in staircases and attic rooms. He tries to defend himself but does not even know the accusation. The trial is a nightmare that feels familiar to anyone who has dealt with confusing systems. Joseph meets people who follow orders blindly. He learns that no one really understands the law. They only know how to obey it. He is never free of the accusation, even though he is allowed to continue his daily life. The guilt stays with him like a shadow. He visits corrupt lawyers, strange judges, court officials who work in suffocating attic rooms, and a painter who explains that the judges care more about victory than justice. The most famous moment in the story is the parable before the law. A man stands before a doorkeeper and asks to enter the law. The doorkeeper refuses to let him in but says that he may enter later. The man waits his entire life, never trying to walk through. He dies in front of the door. The doorkeeper tells him the door was meant only for him, then he closes it. Kafka understood the pain of being stuck outside something you can never reach, a job you cannot escape, a father you can never please, a body you cannot control, a world that feels completely indifferent to you. The trial ends with Joseph K. being taken to a quarry by 2 men. He knows what is going to happen but does not fight. Just before he dies, he says, like a dog, the shame will outlive him. Kafka's final and unfinished novel, The Castle, follows a land surveyor known simply as K. He arrives at a village controlled by a mysterious bureaucracy inside a castle. The castle officials summon him, yet he can never reach them. He tries to meet Clam, one of the officials, but everything is blocked by layers of confusion, rules, and contradictions. Villagers worship the officials even though none of them understand what the officials actually do. The Castle is about the search for meaning in a world that refuses to explain itself. Miscommunication brings K to the village, and yet nothing he tries corrects the mistake. Everyone treats the castle's decisions like unquestionable truth, even when they contradict each other. The more K tries to understand the system, the more impossible it feels. The novel ends without an ending. K never reaches the castle. Besides his novels, Kafka also wrote parables to capture his sense of absurdity. In one of them he says, "If you follow parables, you will become parables, and in that way you will be freed from daily worries." Someone answers, "I am sure that too is a parable," and so you see how even the escape becomes another trap. Kafka believed that books should wound and stab us. It should shake us awake, not just entertain us. That belief shaped everything he wrote. As Kafka grew weaker from tuberculosis, he wrote and edited stories until he could no longer speak. One of his last pieces, Josephine the Singer or the Mousefolk, is about a mouse who believes her singing is special and deserves admiration. But the mouse society is practical and indifferent. They enjoy her singing but do not think it is anything extraordinary. When Josephine disappears, they simply continue life without her. It reflects Kafka's own fear of being forgotten. The Hunger Artist is another one of his late works. It tells the story of a performer who fasts inside a cage while people watch him. Supervisors watch closely to make sure he truly does not eat, yet he always feels misunderstood. The world moves on from his art and becomes interested in newer, louder attractions. He eventually joins a circus but is ignored. Before he dies, he admits that he fasted because he never found food he liked, not because he wanted attention. After his death, his cage is replaced by a panther who becomes a far more exciting attraction. The world forgets him instantly. Kafka died on June 3, 1924, at age 40. His throat was so damaged from tuberculosis that he could not eat. At that time, there was no way to feed someone without swallowing. He starved to death, quietly, in pain. His body was brought back to Praha and buried. He died almost unknown, but today his grave is covered with stones, papers, and handwritten notes from people who feel his words save them in their darkest moments. Kafka once wrote that humans cannot live without a belief in something indestructible inside them, even if they never see it clearly. Maybe that is why his writing still lives. He wrote from a place of fear, loneliness, and confusion, yet something inside him kept fighting to express itself. That hidden strength is the same thing people feel when they connect with his stories. Kafka is remembered because he said out loud the things many people feel but cannot express. His work became the voice for everyone who has ever felt alienated, lost, or misunderstood. If I got something wrong or misunderstood part of Kafka's story, feel free to correct me in the comments. Let's learn together. And while you're there, tell me which Kafka work you connected with the most. If you want more videos like this, hit like, subscribe, and tap the bell so you don't miss the next one. Thank you for watching. Seriously,